Okay, so this is Anne Björkman, and I want to tell you a little about studying career counselling for visually impaired students in Denmark. I work as a study and career counsellor at the National Institute for the Blind and Partially Sighted in Denmark. And first I want to tell you a little bit about what kind of guidance we offer at the Institute for the physiotherapy students. Then I want to go through a little bit of history about the physiotherapists in Denmark, and then I did some interview with some of our students and teachers, which I will reflect a little upon. And then I have a little discussion to finish. The counselling and guidance in Denmark is public, and it's placed at the educational institutions. But then at the institute, which I will from now call IBRS, Institute for Blind and Partially Sighted, we have an extra service, a guidance service, counselling service. So we support the blind and partially sighted students in high school and in higher education, and that also means the physiotherapist students. So what we offer is courses concerning choice of study program, where we discuss their educational interests, their aims, their dreams, where will they have to compromise, where will they have to fight. Sometimes we make an investigation to secure that the students' choice is possible to go through, and also to secure that it's possible to work in large part of the labor market relevant to the specific education. Also, we have counselling during their study program. That could be introductory meeting at the university with teachers and counsellors. And counselling concerning, for instance, use of assistive technology and instruction in their use of the educational materials for visually impaired, how to use a secretary, the practical training periods, what to know in these periods, exemptions from exams, what kind of rights do I have and what do other visually impaired students do, and studying abroad. If they want to study abroad, they can have some counselling. And then in the transition from university to labour market, we also do courses once a year, career counselling concerning their rights on the labour market. And one of the big questions in that course is, for instance, how do I present my visual impairment in the job application? So it's things like that we discuss. And we also invite employers to come to give good advices to the students. And we have mentor guidance. We have 43 mentors at the Institute, which are blind and partially sighted, which are in the labour markets and who act as mentors for the students. Okay, so that was the counselling, just very short. A little bit of history. Since 1943, blind and partially sighted students have been educated as physiotherapists in Denmark. And then in the 60s and 70s, there was kind of a fight, you can say, between the teachers and the organizations for the blind. And There was no visually impaired student who were educated in that period. The teachers were very skeptical into educating visual impaired physiotherapists, and the headmaster of the school supported the teachers. So it went all the way up to, to the government, and in 1974 there was a commission sent out to explore the possibilities for the blind students to be educated as physiotherapists. And in 1975 the conclusion was that a support committee was set up, and the School of Copenhagen, where all the blind students at that time were educated, they got a special grant to pay a full-time teacher for the blind students. And then until 2001 there was a cooperation between the School of Copenhagen and then IBUS. IBUS provided the student with a preparation course before they started and supported them during their studies. But in 2001 the grant for the school disappeared when the Act on Special Educational Assistance for Higher Education entered into force. And the conclusion at that time of the School of Copenhagen was that they could no longer educate blind physiotherapists. And since then no blind students have been educated, only partially sighted. And today the partially sighted students are educated all over the countries. I think it's, is it 7? In 7 universities in Denmark they educate. So they are included in the universities. Okay, so I've been working at the Institute for the last 12 years, and in that period, from 2002 until 2014, 17 students with a visual impairment started education as a physiotherapist. Out of these 17, there were 3 who stopped before they finished, and I've been talking to all 3, and there, some of them, it was, as they said, also some psychological problems, but I don't know what comes first. I think that sometimes it can be that it was because it was so difficult, they didn't get any help, that perhaps that was the reason why they got these psychological problem. It's difficult to tell. And one of them who nearly finished, she was in her last placement, and the clinical educator was very skeptical and couldn't see that there was any possibilities for blind and partially sighted. So that did that she finished. Yeah. So, and then 7 is still in education. Out of the 17, 6 is working as a physiotherapist in different areas, both hospitals, elder centers, clinics, and one is working on a project concerning labor market. And then there's one without job, which is right now we're helping her at the institute. So this is for the last 12 years. Yes, well, something is happening. Okay, I will have an eye on it. It has its own life. Okay, so I interviewed, out of these 17, I interviewed 6 of the students. Some of them finished now and some of them are still in education. And then 2 counselors, teachers from the universities who have been teaching these visual impaired students. 2 of the students out of the 6 got extra support hours as compensation for disability, which means that 4 of them didn't get any hours, didn't get any support hours at all. So that's interesting, I think. At one of the universities, visual impaired students count for 2 in the clinical placements, but one of the students that were at that school that I talked to told me that she actually heard that she counted for 2, but she didn't get that extra help. So I think there's a communication problem there. All the students used different kind of assistive technology in the clinical placements. Some tell me that they take a meeting with the clinical educator beforehand to tell about the visual impairment, but others don't, so it's not a rule. But the university always requests that the student write or call the clinical educator beforehand to tell about their visual impairment. And all the students reported that they always tell the patients about their visual impairment or wear a badge, for instance. Okay, so one of the things that I asked them was where did they see challenges in their clinical placements. And most of them said we're out in big hospitals and said, well, big hospitals can be a challenge. It's difficult to get around, find things. So this was one of them. Another is gait analysis. It's difficult to have the overview. 2 of them said that it was very difficult to work with fragile patients, for instance, elderly patients. Or newly operated, they were so afraid that they would fall, and so there were some problems there. There were some patients, neurological patients, they mentioned patients in psychiatry where there were some communication problems, difficult to read face and body language, so some of them said that they didn't want to work in that area. Another thing that many of them mentioned was to train a large group of people. In Denmark, it's often a very large group of people that they train, and this can be difficult. Well, then there was, for instance, Zoom text that often does not work with the journaling programs. There's a transportation, which we often hear is a problem, also in other sectors. But then there's this thing about attitudes, which I think is very important when I hear all the interviews. That there was, one of the teachers told me that when they first started educating visual impaired students, there was a very big skepticism from the clinical educators that they called her and said, but we can't educate these people. And so she invited all the clinical educators to her university to discuss this with them, and she said it's not you have to do this, and she actually used the act on the UN Convention on Disability for the Disabled. to tell them that they had to do this, and we also have some national legislation that she used. So they had a good discussion about, so how can we do it? But so there was, of course, lack of knowledge from the clinical educators and fear of the unknown, I think, in a way. And then I've written this about self-confidence, fear, lack of creativity, and this is when I interviewed all the students, what I met was, I meet students every day. I've met hundreds and hundreds through these 12 years of students with visual impairment, and what I notice is, like everyone else in this world, that there's a difference between some come with a big self-confidence and then it's easier. But if you lack self-confidence from the start, if you have fear of going into it, then it's difficult. And what I could hear when they talked about the challenges, for instance, is that they all said, well, it's difficult with gait analysis, or it's difficult with big hospitals. But the students who had a good self-confidence, they said, but then I used the other students, or then I found out a way to do it. So they didn't see it as a problem. They could see it was a challenge, but it wasn't a problem. Whereas the other group of students, they were very fearful, and they saw it as a big problem. So there's both these inner and outer challenges. And I think it's very important that we also see these inner challenges. So, if we look at the future, written here, can blind persons work as physiotherapists in Denmark in the future? Well, I don't know, but as I see it, there's, on the one hand, there is the ideal world where we have, for instance, the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which in the Article 24 and Article 27 says that we have to include people with a handicap in education and in the working life. And we also in Denmark have national legislation which says the same, which is based on this UN Convention. And then we have all these teachers and students with a lot of positive energy and creativity. I meet them every day at the institutions. But on the other hand, in practice, I see in Denmark some systems as a barrier. We have, for instance, the taximeter system, which means that education in Denmark is free, but the education or the university is paid when the students finish their studies. So it's very important for the university to get in students who they are sure they will finish. And sometimes I have heard some of the teachers, the counselors say that they're afraid to take in, for instance, visual impaired students because perhaps they won't finish their studies. So this is what I see as a barrier in the systems. The other is provider numbers. I have written here that it's very it costs a lot of money to have a clinic in Denmark. Some take loans to get this, be a physiotherapist and get a clinic, have a provider number. And my colleague, who is a career counselor and helps the students who finish to get to the labor market, she told me the other day that she had been to several clinics with an unemployed physiotherapist with visual impairment, and the clinics they fear that this person will not be effective enough, because there's so much money in play. So they will be, they want to be sure that this person that can, work on the same conditions. So I very much see that there are some barriers here. And then, of course, the skepticism that I have been talking about, and negative attitudes. I see that also. Okay, so last, I would like a discussion about, I have taken the Article 24 in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and it says that states parties shall ensure that persons with disabilities are able to access general tertiary education, vocational training, adult education and lifelong learning without discrimination and on an equal basis with others. To this end, states parties shall ensure that reasonable accommodation is provided to persons with disabilities. So what I would like to discuss is that we who are in this field and who are going out, for instance, at the universities to give guidance to the teachers, to the clinical educators and others, that we discuss what does on equal basis mean in practice, that we give some examples, and what is reasonable accommodations for visually impaired students in the clinical placement, because I think it's very important that if it's on equal basis, it's not the same that they have to do, but how can we do it in another way? So this would be an important discussion, I think. Okay. Thank you for listening.
Questions or comments on that?
Can I say something? Okay, my director from school, from physiotherapists, I remember Louis Gallet have said blind people are not the same as the other, but they do to become better than the other. And it's a word, is historical word.